Hey, how's it going? I hope you're well. I want to talk to you today how to discuss salary expectations with the recruiter. And this, by the way, is for any kind of job. So although this channel is about cloud, DevOps to some degree, developers and development, this is pretty much for any salaried job you can use this technique for. So salary expectations, they typically come up at the first round interview with the recruiter from HR. And sometimes you might see that HR come into the interview process at a later stage, maybe round 2 or round 3, but typically with the first round. And discussing salary expectations is what's known as a knockout question. Okay, so if it's too high what you say, then you're going to price yourself out, and if it's too low, then you're actually going to make yourself underpaid, and you're going to have feelings of resentment and bitterness growing, which is not good for you. This is, by the way, why you might see like people who are in elite sports level, they negotiate their salary when it comes up to renewal, and it's always increasing and increasing, and you might think, well, they're already a millionaire, why do they really care about getting such a big increase? And the whole point is that if they're worth more, then they're entitled to ask for more. Their value is more, and they can get more. So that's the reason why everybody wants to get paid what they're worth. Otherwise, it's going to actually affect you mentally. So this is the outcome you want, I'm looking for, and the recruiter says, sure, that's fine, you're not knocked out, you're still in the process, let's proceed. So I want to just make this clear, that only your value matters. It's nothing to do with what you may think I deserve, okay? I mean, we all deserve to have a good life, but that's not the market. The market is a capitalist market, and the buyers are the companies, and the sellers are the workers. You and I, the people, the human capital in the market, we all have a price tag, and it reflects the value that we can deliver to that company. So forget immediately any of this I deserve or any kind of entitlement is completely irrelevant. Now, the market is not 100% efficient, by the way. Sometimes, sure, you can get underpaid, and sometimes you can get overpaid. There isn't a 100% efficient way of matching talent to jobs and getting the perfect salary that you should get. It doesn't work that way, so sometimes it's not perfect, but on the whole it works out pretty well. And your maximum salary or the maximum value that you can deliver is derived from your competence in the job. Okay, so a couple of points here. There's no natural right to an ever-growing salary with age. Of course your salary should grow with inflation, but there's no natural right to have inflation busting raises every single year for the rest of your life. There's no right to that. I mean, that can only happen, by the way, if, I say here in the second point, if you keep growing. And you got to keep growing if that's what you want to do. If you want to increase your wealth and beat inflation, and every time you move you get a really hefty rise, then you got to keep growing and developing. That's the only way. You can't just get your degree and then never learn anything ever again, or rely on your experience but still not really develop in the workplace. You've got to keep growing, you've got to keep developing. Otherwise, your competence is not going to increase, and you're not going to get these big increases in your salary. That's just the way it is. Why should anyone pay you more for no reason whatsoever? So, for this discussion you're going to have with HR, first you've got to do some preparation, you've got to research the market, and then you've got to know or calculate your worth. So, first of all, do your own personal survey of salaries for your role at all levels, by the way. You want to know what the salaries are being paid out there in the market. Now, I know a lot of job descriptions don't tell you the salary, but there are enough that do that you can figure this out. So I'm going to make an example here because it's a market that I'm familiar with. How about in Western Europe, DevOps or SRE engineer? And typically what you'll find is that the mid-level, or what some companies call the core, is paying between 50 and 90k. And then the senior level is paying about 80 to 120k. So there's always going to be quite a wide range. This depends. Some companies are generous, some companies are not so generous, they're stingy. Some companies are prepared to pay more because they're looking for high performers. Some companies, they won't admit it, but they can only afford low performers. it's not an efficient market as well, so sometimes they're probably overpaying for what they're going to get. Sometimes they're going to be underpaying. It really, really depends. But on the whole, there's a range here, and you can actually see here that it's a kind of overlapping range, as low as 50 but up to 90. But senior can actually start from the lowest senior can actually be paid less than the highest mid or core. So but these are roughly the ranges. The next question you got to ask yourself is, based on your competence, based on where you are in your progress in your career, your level of development, what you know, how you can perform, how you rank yourself against other people in your market. Are you average? Are you above average? Are you below average? Are you a really top level performer? Be honest. Leave your ego aside here, because your ego is not going to help you. Be honest. Where do you rank yourself? So for example, you can have someone that considers themselves to be a mid-senior, that they're above average, that they think that they're worth to a company about 90k. They don't regard themselves as being 110, 120k. They know that that would be asking too much, but they consider themselves to be 90k. And that's what they'd be looking for out of their job. It could be that the current job they're not earning 90k, and the reason quite often for that is maybe their current job they're on 80k, 75k, but they've since developed a lot both on the job and outside the job from self-study. And what happens is quite often you might not get decent raises while you're working at a company. It's just easier for a company to hold on to you, give you maybe 5 or 10% or something like that, but not really giving you perhaps commensurate with your capabilities, with your competence, and you need to move to get yourself that. And this is quite commonly the case. So you've evaluated that your real worth is 90k. So here's what we're going to do. Now we come to discussing with the recruiter, and they ask you that magic question that they always ask, this kind of poker question. So how much are you looking for? Now you've got two choices here, and both of them are equally good. It really doesn't matter. You can't go wrong. Now one of them is your precise worth. In this case, in this example, it's going to be 90k. The other one, what you can do is you can give a range. You can start at 90k and then add roughly 10%, or choose a more easy to work with kind of band. So in this case 10% is roughly 10k. So you say, right, 90 to 100k. So again, one of the two, either your precise worth 90k or you say 90 to 100k. So what is the reason that you do this? The reason is you don't want to be offered anything less than that, and you're saying up front 90k or 90 to 100k. It's pretty clear that they should not be thinking really of trying to go under 90k, because they will know that you're going to be disappointed in that. So they're not even going to try at any point, either on that day or later on down the line, to go under what is your minimum. Or if they think maybe we'll go under your minimum, but they got to offer you something pretty hefty, like a really big bonus, maybe a signing on bonus, or maybe some other bonus potential, maybe stock options or whatever. But it's clear in terms of salary that that's your minimum. Now the reason to put this range here is because this allows some wiggle room, but with a hard minimum. So this is like saying, well, 90 to 100k, if they eventually come back with an offer to you, they know that they can't really come back with an offer of 90k, because you're going to say, well, I said way back in round one, 90 to 100, I wasn't really looking for the bottom end of my range, I was kind of hoping for a bit more. So this gives you some wiggle room, so they'll probably come back and give you either a 100k offer. Maybe they might come back with something in the middle, which is still going to be okay, right? Or you could even expand this range. You can say 90 to 110, something like that, if you suspect that they're going to come back with something in the middle. But if you give a range like this, they're pretty much not going to come back with the minimum in your range. It's unlikely. They might do, and if they do, if it's a great job, then it's okay. They've still met what you were looking for anyway. So that's why you should. A range is quite a good idea. But to be honest, in my experience, either of them are pretty good. This is early stage, remember. This is, as I say here in my next point, this is not a final negotiating position. It's not a final negotiation of an offer. It's simply just a screening. The whole point of this question being asked at this point, what are your expectations for salary, is just to see if you and the employer can both proceed to round 2, where you can meet the manager and meet the team. That's the only reason. It's not a final negotiation, so don't worry about that. You just want to make sure that you're not knocked out at this stage, and that they're not trying to be too cheap, where you wouldn't be interested anymore. Now, sometimes at this stage, they'll actually reveal their budget. I've had this many, many times. I wonder if you're surprised by that or not, but I've had this many times that you give a value or a range, and then they actually say, well, okay, that's pretty good. You're already within our range. I've had people say, well, you're in the middle of our range. So they've actually revealed what they're willing to pay. Maximum is actually higher than the figure you gave. Or I've even had a recruiter say, oh, that's okay, no worries, you're below our minimum. They actually told me that their minimum is higher than what basically I've quoted as a minimum. So you'll be surprised, and it's actually quite mature when a company does this, that they're willing to just give you their budget, and it's actually kind of revealing as well. It kind of tells you, if you actually came in at well under their budget, it kind of tells you that they're probably got teams of quite high performers, that they're used to having to offer quite high salaries because they attract pretty good talent. That also tells you that there's probably going to be quite good growth opportunities to really develop and learn a lot there. I mean, that is the best situation, to hang around high performers and become even better yourself. That's what I think anyway. Another thing that matters, and I alluded to this earlier, is the whole package matters, okay? So remember, it's not just the salary. I know salary is super important, and there's nothing more liquid than money, right? But options, bonus, all of those things, whether the bonus is guaranteed or not, dependent on performance maybe, or whether it's a signing on or an annual bonus, these things do matter. And options and bonus are worth money, but also other things matter as well, such as some companies don't include health insurance, some do. That makes a big difference materially. And there are other things. Maybe they pay for transport expenses, maybe they don't, etc. Maybe they pay overtime, maybe they don't. Maybe they pay for being on call, maybe they don't. So the whole package does matter, and all of those things are financial. There are non-financial things as well that can matter too. There's a big one that matters that I'll get onto later after this slide. So when it comes to offer time, I do want to make a small note here. Later on, let's assume you go to second round, third round, possibly more rounds. You both grow to like each other. You both grow to see that there's a good match there. And it comes down to offer time. They contact you. They say, thank you for going through our process. We really enjoyed meeting you, and we want to make you an offer. Now, this moment here when they said, what are you looking for? I said, it's not a final negotiation. When it comes to an offer, you can actually negotiate that offer higher than what you originally said. Let's say you said 90K. That doesn't mean you're bound to 90K. You can say, actually, I've considered the worth of the work that you expect me to deliver to you. I've realized that you're a much higher performing team than I thought you were, a higher performing company. The work that you demand of me is going to be a lot more than it would be at an ordinary company, and I'm looking in return for more money as well. And you can perfectly say that. It's perfectly justified. I actually think that's a great way to do it, to say, look, you're a much better company than I thought you were, and I want to be part of this, but in return I'm going to expect more money. And the other thing to make note of is that when it comes to being offered, you're in a position of power. They have invested a lot of time, and they've grown to like you over that time, and they want you by that stage. They really want you. So you're actually in a far stronger position later on than you were in the beginning. They don't want to waste time having to go through the whole process again. They want you at that moment. So you're in a stronger position of power to negotiate for something more. So use that power, definitely. But I do have a caveat with this, and it's the second point here. In a recession or in tough times, and I would say now is tough times with a lot of layoffs and a lot of companies not really investing and not much headcount, so it's a high competition scenario. Think strongly before you negotiate. What I would not advise you to do is do not negotiate hard at this moment. It's very different if the reverse were true. You can negotiate hard, but right now it is not a good time for negotiation. I have actually heard of many cases where people have said, I tried to negotiate an offer, and then after that they rescinded the offer. They rejected me, basically. So that is a danger of negotiating an offer. What I would say to you in the current times right now, when it's quite difficult to get a job, that if you followed my strategy here and you determined that you're worth already, in this case it was 90K, and you came out with a figure or a range that was covering that figure, then they're not going to come back with anything lower than that. You should really be happy even if they come in at the minimum here. And I would say accept what they come back with, as long as it meets that initial number or initial minimum that you quoted way back in round one. I would say just take it. I would say right now, don't negotiate it, just take it. Of course, if they come in and they lowball you and they come in under what you said, then you're perfectly entitled to say, hey look, you know, at round one you knew what my minimum was, and you know, I can't budge from that. To be honest, it's kind of unprofessional to go through more rounds and then to come back as a company and lowball you when someone right at round one said that. So, you know, some people would consider that kind of unprofessional and unforgivable, but you know, if you consider that you really like the team and you're willing to overlook that, then I suppose at that point you can say, look, you know what my minimum is, I can do that, or you can maybe give me something else, signing on bonus or something to make up for it, but I really can't budge. But it's almost never going to happen that they come back like that, and you don't need to negotiate then. You can just accept that value. Now I want to make a very important point here. You should always prioritize your personal growth over short-term money. It is foolish to demand too much money for your next job, and it is also, I wouldn't say foolish, but if your next job doesn't quite pay what you wanted it to pay, what you think your value is, then remember, all is not lost. It could be that perhaps that company's earnings are not so great right now economically, and their budgets have been slashed, which, although I haven't seen budgets being slashed too much in the present climate, because you know, companies still need to attract talent and attract it away from other companies, there are definitely some companies have slashed their budgets a bit in terms of salaries that they can offer. So what I want to say to you is, don't let that stop you from moving to a great next job. Always prioritize your growth over short-term money, because in the long term, growth will always pay better. And I got an example here that I drew by hand in Excalibur. Okay, and think of this as two paths that the same person can take. So I want to start with the orange one. Okay, and each of these lines represents a salary at the different companies that they worked at. Now, it's not including raises that they might have gotten at the company. Assume that they didn't get any raises. Assume that they had to move company to get a salary bump. Now, what happens here is the first two jobs, the first two paths that this person could take, the salary is the same. But then when it came to job 3, they chose one that had a slightly higher salary than the other. Okay? Now you might think, great, that's what everybody should do. However, I want to show you there was an alternative path that they could have taken, and this other job offered less money. Now remember, the market's not efficient. It doesn't always work out that the salaries are going to match for how good the job is. But in this case, the salary was slightly lower. But I want to tell you that this job, the green line, this job offered way more growth potential. The job itself covered more interesting technologies. The job itself, the company was more invested in growing their employees and giving them really good training and making sure that they weren't getting bored and that type of thing. Whereas the other job that paid more, you could call it like the orange job that paid more, it was a dead-end job. Okay, it was really going to stunt that person's growth. It offered more, sure, but it didn't offer a lot of good growth, whereas the one in green did, even though it paid less. And what you find is if you always look at growth and ignore short-term money, then what actually happens is usually short-term money will be better anyway, but in the long term you will grow far higher if you prioritize growth every time. And that's what happens to the path that was taken that I marked in green. That even though in the short term, for just one job, for just 2 or maybe 3 years max, it paid less and they weren't able to build as much wealth, but very quickly it paid off. So always prioritize for growth. Don't get obsessed with short-term money. Always go for growth. That's just a very, very important career message that I wanted to make. And a lot of people make this mistake of looking at short-term growth. It is important. Money is important. But surely long-term money is important than short-term money. And you can withstand this small bump in the road here of a slightly lesser salary for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. But in the long term, you'll make and you'll build a lot more money and wealth. So I wanted to make that clear. So listen, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. We're really growing. We had some videos go viral recently. We're now 63 subscribers, so I'm super stoked about this. Give this video a like. Check out my other videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.